We got a big injury update on Matthew Stafford and Jonah Jackson and which Rams are going to make this 53-man roster. We're going to look at some of those players on the bubble who made a strong case in the Rams' last preseason game. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and let us know. What are your thoughts on Tom Brady showing some Rams love? So let us know down below. My name is Doug McCain. Friends call me DMAC. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. Bleacher Report, SI, Dodgers Nation, 24/7 Sports. Now the Rams 4 Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He just entered his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the people's champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, we got some more horns up, horns down, the best and worst PFF grades of the Rams' second preseason game, and a big injury update with Matthew Stafford and Jonah Jackson. But first, today's episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay, so we are Brandon Powell, Wes Welker days away from opening kickoff. Yes, Wes Welker was randomly a Ram one of these days, but we're closing in. And before we get into the injury news, Tom Brady, who some view as the GOAT, he says showing the Rams some loves. He said at Fanatics Fest that the Rams are going to be really good this year, and he believes they're one of the few teams in the NFL that are a threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in the NFL. So, hey, I like Tom Brady as an analyst already. So definitely like hearing that from Tom.
Yeah, I let's just put it this way. I'm a little skeptical as to how he's going to do as an analyst, but I like that. Like you said, D-Mac, that Tom Brady is seeing something that leads him to believe that the Rams are one of the few teams that could give the Chiefs a run for their money. I like it. It makes sense, right? Because if you're thinking about, first of all, I think the Chiefs are being asked to do something that has never been done before, and that's win 3 Super Bowls in a row. That's never happened in the history of this league. So history is stacked up against them. So somebody is likely to clip them. But what would have to happen? You'd have to have a team that I think can score with them, a team that's able to kind of go punch for punch with them offensively. I think the Rams, at least theoretically on paper, have the ability to do that. Whether or not they have the ability to stop Patrick Mahomes, time will tell. We'll see what Chris Shula's defense looks like, what it looks like without Aaron Donald. But offensively, and then I think the other part of it is do you have a coach that knows how to close the show? And the Rams do, right? Sean McVay knows how to do this. He's done it. Matthew Stafford knows how to do it. He's done it. There won't be, fear or anxiety or whatever those emotions may be going into a big game like that. They're going to be very comfortable on that stage. I think that's what you would need to beat the Chiefs. And if that's what Brady's seeing, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. And I definitely think it's going to be one of the interesting storylines this season, him as a broadcast. I'll never forget Peyton Manning at the roast of Tom Brady. He comes out there and he says, I want nothing but the best for my friend. Everyone thinks that now that he's in broadcasting, we're rivals again, that I want to see him embarrass himself and fail. And he said, that's absolutely ridiculous. It's Coach Belichick who wants to see that. So I definitely like seeing him in the broadcasting world. The roast of Tom Brady was classic and good to see him feel good about our Los Angeles Rams. And really, of course, their success or failure is going to hinge on Matthew Stafford this season. And we got some good news out of practice on Monday. Matthew Stafford was reportedly wearing a glove on his left hand due to a little cut or wound that he suffered. And they're being extremely, extremely cautious. Now, he didn't take part in 11-on-11s, but if you look at some of the clips from practice, he did look like he was moving well, that the hamstring isn't a big issue.
Yeah, look, he's out there. He's moving. Maybe it wasn't 11 on 11s like you mentioned, and you'd like to see that happen before you get to Detroit. But again, there's time. There's a whole week. They're going to Houston. They're taking on the Texans, a joint practice. Maybe he gets out there. Maybe he doesn't. And then you got the better part of 10 days or so after that before you're actually out there getting ready to play a real game. I'm optimistic that he's going to be okay. Had he just been standing on the sidelines doing nothing, I think that's where you start to have your eyebrows go up a little bit and start to worry about how effective he may be. But yeah, I'm in a pretty good spot mentally as far as where I think he's going to be. Like you said, if he's not right, none of this really matters. After that, it would be an incredibly steep uphill climb without him. But looks like at least at the start of the season, you're going to have your most important guy.
Absolutely. And when it comes to hamstring tightness, if there was anything there, there's no way he's going to be out there doing individual work, and that's what he was doing. So it feels like we're going to forget that we even had this injury to begin with. So definitely that's positive. And also one that's definitely another positive is Jonah Jackson returning to practice. He's been dealing with that bruised scapula. He's been sidelined pretty much the most of training camp so far. He was back. He was doing individual work as well. So they're ramping both of these guys up. They're not going to be participating in the joint practice session with the Texans later this week, but just the fact that these two key starters are back there putting some work in definitely is a major positive.
Yeah, I think of all the guys on the offensive line that we've been talking about missing time, and you're talking about Alaric Jackson, you're talking about Jonah Jackson, you're talking about Rob Havenstein, that Jonah Jackson was the one that I think Rams fans and you and me, we all felt like, okay, maybe that's the one that might linger into the regular season. Maybe that's the one that isn't quite ready to go opening night in Detroit, and that he was out there and participating. And like you said, maybe it wasn't full participation, but that there was even partial participation, I think is a really good sign. This, again, we've said this a million times. The everydayers know this. This was their big free agent acquisition. This was the guy that they went out and targeted and spent money on and felt like, that they could put him there to move Avila to center. Kind of was the piece that allowed them to start to move some of their offensive line around the way that they did. He's got an injury history. He missed some time with the Lions last year, so that he's ready to go, or at least getting closer to ready to go, is a really good sign. He's a great player. It's just a matter of whether or not he can get on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, as you mentioned, he was their big ticket item. 3 years, $51 million. A couple years ago, the big flashy guy was Allen Robinson. Also brought in Brandon Powell that offseason. But this year, it was an offensive lineman. And the sooner he gets back, the sooner he can build cohesion and chemistry with these offensive linemen that he's going to be paired with. And that's going to be massive, too. So he definitely has dealt with the injuries that we saw a couple of seasons ago. It wasn't just the injuries. It was just the fact that you couldn't get five guys playing together for consecutive weeks that really took its toll and prevented this team from doing anything that season. So getting him back is going to be massive. And I think for this team as a whole, one of the other big storylines is Steve Avila. Is Steve Avila going to be a Pro Bowl center in year one? Well, we'll start with his potential backup, and we're going to kind of keep it's a little quick transition. We'll get one of these horns down in here, and Mike McAllister. So Mike McAllister, he went in there, he filled in for Bo Limmer as the game progressed, and he gave a lot of ground. I mean, the blocking game, he wasn't really good as far as his run blocking, led to some tackles for a loss, just wasn't really getting very much at all of a push. So I think Bo Limmer has passed Mike McAllister as the backup center, and he's really making a big push to make this team.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have to worry about anybody being the backup center. Hopefully that Steve Avila is the guy that just holds that down. Kind of going back to him from his rookie season, I think as good as he was, and he was, as effective as he was, and he was, the thing that just jumps off the page at you for me, he played every snap of the season. Yeah. Like that's not a euphemism and exact. He played in every snap. I talked to him shortly after the season had ended. He took great pride in that, and rightfully so. He is a durable guy. Obviously, it's football, and you're in the trenches, and anything can happen. But knowing that he has that kind of durability, knowing that he's got that kind of strength and tenacity, I think bodes really well for what they're trying to do. You're right. If all of a sudden he's unavailable for whatever reason, it does change things. Like we talked about a second ago with Jonah Jackson, that all of these pieces kind of fit together to allow these guys to slide to different positions. If all of a sudden you have a weakness or an injury at one of these spots, it could be a big deal. And look, depth is always an issue. Depth is always something that you're going to get tested on at some point in the season or not. But hopefully it's not with the center, because he was your rock last year, and I think they're looking at him to be the rock again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another reason why you want to keep these premier guards healthy, because you don't want to have to see him go back there to the guard position when the focus needs to be on playing that center spot, which they feel is his best position in year 2, and play it at a high level. And I think it's just one of the sports storylines during preseason is Bo Limmer. He's got the upside. He's more athletic. He just performed better than Mike McAllister. And I think that he's got that backup center spot locked up. He can never have enough depth at that offensive line. So, yeah, coming up next, more horns up, more horns down, and a cornerback that we've been waiting to pop that just hasn't been able to do it. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
It's great when they take two things that are awesome and put them together. So you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, right? America's #1 sportsbook. Well, now we've got something a little bit different for you with FanDuel, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So what you're doing is you're taking FanDuel and you're putting it together with the NFL Sunday Ticket. What could be better than that? You got your little FanDuel action. You get to watch every single out-of-market game. What more could you possibly ask for? Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you will be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. If you've never had the Sunday Ticket, let me just tell you, it is a game changer. You are not going to believe how much football you get to actually watch. It is terrific. All you need is a Google account. You need a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So this is how you do it. You visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. You get all your football, you get all of your action, and just telling you right now, Dodgers still the favorite to win the World Series, currently sitting at +300. Go check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you. And you should join the Everyday Listeners Club too. Membership is 100% free, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, here in our second segment, some more horns up, horns down. And a horns down for Trey Tomlinson. Trey Tomlinson, we've been waiting for him to take that next step, to impress the coaches, to make his case to be on this 53-man roster. And on Saturday, he earns a 45.5 PFF grade. Another bad penalty. He was called for illegal contact on that 3rd and 19 that gave the Chargers a first down. It was an incomplete pass, and even on that pass, he got beat deep by Quentin Johnson, and the Easton Stick was able to kind of help him out in that situation. It was a little overthrow by him, but he just hasn't looked the part. I mean, he's just not disciplined enough, not making enough plays, and I think he's on the outside looking in for this 53-man roster.
Well, I think the most important thing that you pointed out is that this is the second week in a row that something has happened that could potentially really hurt your football team. And these are big penalties. These are penalties that result in first downs. These are penalties that result in the other team getting to stay on the field, getting to continue drives. That look, you're going to get beat occasionally. Everybody does. That's part of the way that sports works. You don't win every single time. That's just not what it is. But what you can't do is double lose. And that's what's kind of happening with him, is whether it's a late hit out of bounds, whether it's the illegal contact penalties that you're talking about. And this kind of fills in some of the gaps that you and I have been talking about for the last season or so when it comes to Trey Tomlinson. Why isn't he on the field? Well, if I can't trust you not to take bad penalties, I can't put you out there. And I think you've gotten to see it a couple of times. This goes back to last preseason. We saw some bad penalties from him there as well. Coaches like predictability. They like reliability. They like knowing that if I put you out there, this is what you're going to give me. Even if it's not perfect, I need you to give me the same thing every single time. And Trey Tomlinson just really hasn't been able to do that. Like you mentioned, you and I think we're both pretty high on him last year coming into the season. It never really happened for him. It hasn't really happened for him so far in this training camp. And I tend to agree with you, Doug. I wonder if he's actually a part of what they're going to do when we get to Sunday night in Detroit.
Yeah, they don't have a ton of cornerback depth, but they also have Quentin Lake and Russ East, who can play cornerback in a pinch.
Yeah.
You got Darius Williams and Tre'Davious White, two big offseason acquisitions. Kobe Durant has had a really nice training camp. Jerry Jacobs, he's going to be on this team as well. So it's not like he didn't have his opportunity for Trey Tomlinson, but he just hasn't made the most of it. And then a player that we were really high on after the Rams' first preseason game, Tyler Davis, he didn't have his best showing. He had a 41.6 PFF grade, but I think one of the issues was he wasn't playing nose tackle like we've seen him play. He was mainly at defensive end. I mean, for a guy that's over 300 pounds, not necessarily, I think, the best spot to optimize him. And he was kind of struggling to get off the blocks there, and he wasn't making very many plays in the run game. So not the best to follow up a great performance in his first preseason game from Tyler Davis.
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at this. There's the way that you just described, which is they had him a little bit out of position, and maybe that's not where he's going to be best served for body type or whatever it may be. That's just not the position that the league may have in store for him. Okay, and he didn't look particularly good doing it. That's one way. Or the other way is they're trying to find a way to keep him, to see what other things that he can do, to see what else he brings. And we saw him against who was it at opening week? Cowboys. And he looked pretty good, maybe not quite as good as Chargers, but you get to see him in a different role and trying to figure out if you can use him here or there. Like, keep in mind, we've seen them move guys around to different places and try guys out of spots that maybe might be more traditionally suited for. I'm curious to see what it looks like against the Texans. I'm curious to see if they put him back inside and whether or not he can have an impact against Houston the way that he did against Dallas. Outside does not look like the spot for him, but that they were willing to try some things, I think is actually a good sign for him, that they're trying to see if he might have some versatility in there.
Absolutely, for sure. That's definitely a spot where he can provide some value. And then Osan Mathis, he definitely needed to have himself a good afternoon to keep some momentum going for him, to see if he can find a way to make this 53-man. He had an 87.7 PFF grade, played well against the Chargers. Nick Hampton, a 50.4 PFF grade. He's going to make this team, in my opinion. He had 2 pressures and 10 pass rushing snaps. It wasn't the best, but I mean, if you look at the battle there, I mean, Byron Young, Jared Verse, Michael Hoyt, those are the locks. And then you got Brennan Jackson and Nick Hampton. I think Osan Mathis and Zach Van Valkenburg, that Hampton's going to beat those two guys out.
Van Valkenburg's looked good in the 2 preseason games, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just a matter of numbers there, and maybe there's some practice squad availability for some of these guys. But this is just one of those things that is so true about just sports in general, and especially when you get to the highest level of these things, like you're talking about in the NFL. There are more good players than there are places to put them, right? Just because you don't make a team doesn't mean that you're not a good player. Doesn't mean that there isn't a future for you in the league. Some teams have a surplus of certain positions and a deficit at others. And, you just got to find, get in where you fit in sort of situation. And right now, those guys may just be the odd man out in a numbers game.
Absolutely. When you look at practice squad players, by the way, less than 2 seasons, $12K a week. So could be $216,000 a veteran player. You're looking at $20K per week. Do you think they're properly compensated?
I'll take it. I'll go play a little practice squad. Do they need a practice squad like a field goal kicker holder guy? I could do that. I could catch it and put it down. I could do that.
Absolutely. I mean, anything. I mean, anything to help this team, right? I mean, that's what's really
whatever
all about.
It takes.
Sure.
I'm here to serve.
I'm down to get my brains beat in to make $12K a week and be a part of the Rams. Or keep me just, I'll do it for free. I mean,
football is,
I'll do volunteer work.
So brutal. I'm not going to be able to do that. Not a chance.
For sure. But coming up next, some more horns up, horns down, and a player who wasn't in uniform in the Rams' second preseason game that is a strong indication about how the Rams feel about him. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. Welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, so one thing to always look out for the Rams during the preseason is which players started the camp in uniform, participating in games, and as the preseason progresses, are on the sideline and are not in pads. And one of those guys that's kind of graduated to that is Cameron Kitchens. Cameron Kitchens, he played the Rams' first game against the Dallas Cowboys, but after that, he's getting that veteran treatment, that I'm going to make the team treatment. He's with guys like Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and Blake Corum, not in uniform, but not injured as well. So this is someone who could potentially be making a run to be the starting safety over John Johnson III. So really impressed by him.
Well, when you saw him against the Cowboys in that opening game, it was obvious that he was, for lack of a better phrase, just a little bit different than a lot of the other players out there. That just looked like it was of NFL quality, of NFL caliber. And yeah, when you saw him, like, okay, he's not out there, that's a very good sign for him. They spent a relatively high draft pick on him. This is somebody that they are counting on. This is somebody that, like you said, may work their way into a starting position. I'll go back to John Johnson. When they first drafted him originally, he was kind of a mid-round draft pick that's like, okay, let's see if he makes the team. Let's see if he finds his way onto the field. And by the middle of the season, he was your starting safety. Like he progressed through it in a blink of an eye. So I think that there's an opportunity for history to repeat itself there a little bit with Kitchens, because he looks like an NFL player despite having never played a real NFL game.
Absolutely. And I'll never forget Les Snead during the game saying that he's earned their equity and trust. So if he's saying that, it's pretty much all you need to hear. Sure. So definitely a bright spot. Kitchens, I think, is a playmaker from the U. Love the college pedigree. Love what I've seen early on. I think he's someone's going to be a force for this team. And then Zach Evans, another guy almost in that same tier as Trey Tomlinson, where you thought, wow, maybe the Rams found someone later in the draft that was going to be a key contributor, and he hasn't been able to burst onto the scene like you were hoping. He has 51 carries in his career during the preseason, and he still hasn't had a rush over 9 yards. And this is someone who averaged 6.9 yards per carry in college and was supposed to be that guy that could break off some big runs. And on Saturday, averaged 3.9 yards per carry, 62 yards for the game on 16 attempts. And Boston Scott, who had that nice little 34-yard run to put the game away, definitely outperformed him.
There's just not enough space for him to feel really good about where he is on this team, because you just go down the depth chart, you know who's making it for sure. You know Kyron Williams is a part of it. You know Blake Corum is a part of it. They made a move to get Boston Scott during the offseason, so you know that he's likely going to be a part of it. Ronnie Rivers has been a part of it, somebody that they seem to have a decent amount of trust in and rely on him. So that just makes it incredibly difficult to unseat one of those guys, and even more difficult when you really don't shine in the preseason like we're talking about. And again, it's just a numbers game. It doesn't mean that he can't play. It just probably means that he can't play here. And like to your point, that doesn't mean there isn't ability there and somebody may be able to unlock it, but it just hasn't happened here. And there's just not going to be enough opportunity for him to play here, because even if one or even two guys get nicked up a little bit and they can't go, he's so far down the depth chart that you can't imagine. Even last year when they were desperate to get guys out there and they were re-signing Darrell Henderson to come back, he still didn't get an opportunity there. So I think the writing's on the wall for Evans.
Yeah, and I was so excited about him. Just a one cut and go type running back that can make some big plays, but he just has not shown that. If you look at his college tape, what we've seen with the Rams, it's like, where is that guy? And that's what's frustrating when you see Zach Evans. And as you point out, you look at the running backs room, you got three guys that are set in stone, the cemented ones, the Kyron Williams, the Blake Corums, and the Ronnie Rivers. And then Boston Scott's just been better. He has more experience in this thing, is a little more versatile. So I think when you kind of get past the third string there, to have someone that can add something a little different if you need to go there is definitely a positive, and that's what he brings. And Zach Evans just simply doesn't. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.